Building a figure out of shapes and lines. I'm going to download this human proportion worksheet, and I'm going to open it in Photopea. And then I'm going to use it as a template to build a robot using shapes and lines. Now, the shape tool in Photopea will enable you to make various different types of vector-based shapes. You'll have to rasterize them if you want to erase them or otherwise manipulate them. So first off, if you go to this rectangle, hidden underneath it are different types of shapes. I'm going to pick the ellipse tool, and I'm going to change the fill to black. The fill to transparent and the line to black. And I'm going to adjust the outline. If you use the Alt key when you're pulling out a shape, you can pull the shape out from the middle. If you use the Shift key, you'll make a perfect square or a perfect circle. But for shapes where you want to be able to adjust the size, you don't hold the Shift key. However, being able to pull the shape out from the middle allows you to place it exactly. I'm just going through here and adding shapes right on top of my figure, as closely matched to the shapes of the figure as I can match them. If I can't match the shape exactly, one of the things that I can do is I can hit Edit, Transform, and Rotate, or Edit, Transform, and Scale, and I can resize the shape to fit or rotate it to fit the underlying figure. So I'm doing Edit, Transform, Rotate for that arm. If you hold the Shift key down when you do Edit, Transform, Scale, the proportions will stay the same, but if you want to pull the proportions out longer or wider, you don't hit the Shift key. And you can change the proportions and size. What I'm doing now is I went to the top layer and I hit Merge Down, and I kept doing that until all the shapes were combined. Don't combine it with the bottom layer with the original template, but just combine all your shapes and then do right-click on the layer menu and rasterize. And this will change your shapes into pixel-based drawing. At that point, you can just click at the end of a shape and then hold the Shift key and click the other end, and you can erase in a straight line. So I'm using my eraser, and then I'm using my paintbrush tool to click at one end and click at the other end while holding the Shift key down in order to draw straight lines. In that way, I'm able to add straight lines to my drawing in order to continue to create my robot. Anytime you want to connect 2 points with a straight line, you click on the first point, hold the Shift key down on your keyboard, and click on the second point. Anytime you want to erase in a straight line, you click on the first point, hold the Shift key down, and click on the other point. And if you're on the eraser, it will erase. Now, I just rotated an object, by a shape by hitting Edit, Transform, Rotate. I'm creating more shapes, adding them to my robot. And if there's a shape that is slightly off, like for instance the upper arm needs to be tapered a little bit, I'm going to rasterize it, and I can erase that line and replace it with another line. Anytime you create a shape and you want to modify it by erasing part of it and redrawing it, you have to rasterize it first. You can edit it by hitting Edit, Transform, Scale, Edit, Transform, Rotate while it's still a shape. But for anything involving drawing or erasing, it needs to be made out of pixels, and therefore it has to be rasterized. The shape tool creates what are called vector-based objects, A vector-based object is an object that is made out of points on a graph, an infinite number of points on a graph, like the x and the y coordinates, if you remember from geometry. Because they are mathematical points on a graph and not pixels, they can't be erased or manipulated the same way a pixel-based drawing can be. Therefore, if you want to be able to erase it or manipulate it, you have to go to the layer, right-click, and rasterize it. Now, I'm just combining all my shapes as I make them so that my entire person is in one layer. And I'll cut it up and put it into different layers later. So once I have my entire person drawn and created out of shapes, I'm going to hide or delete the underlying template layer. The underlying template is not allowed to be part of your finished piece of work today, okay? It's not allowed. You're using it as a reference. You're not going to be creating art directly out of it. So eventually you're going to delete it, and then you are going to concern yourself with making your robot move. I'm just looking at my robot, making some final tweaks and modifications by erasing and redrawing certain parts. And once I'm happy with the overall look of it, I'm going to start cutting the arms, the legs, and then pasting them back in and renaming the various layers. So I have to determine what parts of my robot I ultimately want to be able to animate or move. So I can use my rectangular marquee tool, I can use my lasso tool, but the idea is that I'm going to be cutting and pasting and then renaming various parts. Every time you cut and paste something in Photopea, it pastes it back in as a new layer. So I'm going to take my lasso tool, I'm cutting out my arm, and then I'm going to do edit paste. Now, if I wanted to move the arm and change what direction it goes in, I'm going to do edit free transform, and then I can actually, if you look in the middle, there's kind of a center point. I'm moving that center point to the edge of the shape so I can rotate it, and it'll actually look like it's rotating on the shoulder. So that's something you can do if you hit free transform. Now I'm moving my figure and the arm more to the middle, so I've got a little bit more room in my document to maneuver. I'm just tweaking how the arm looks so that when I do rotate it, it looks right. And then I'm going to put it back, and I'm going to start cutting out the other arm with my lasso tool, and then edit cut, edit paste, and then edit free transform. And I'm going to take that center point and move it up to the shoulder. And then I'm going to rotate the arm a little bit. And then I'm going to check it off so that it's rotated. And I'm going to continue cutting out the various parts of my person. So I've decided to use the rectangular marquee tool to cut the left leg, and then I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to rename that layer left leg. I've decided to change it so that the upper and the lower leg are both separate. So I'm going to cut out the lower leg. And I'm going to do edit transform. I will edit free transform, and then I'm going to change the pivot point to where the knee is so that it actually looks like it's rotating on the knee. So in this case, you can actually take your person and you're separating them into various layers to create a puppet. Once I'm done creating all the various layers, I'm going to start manipulating and moving the different parts of my person just by doing edit, transform, free transform, and then changing the rotation point. There's a little dot inside each shape. which shows what, if you're going to rotate the shape, what it's going to pivot around, what is the center. And you can actually change that center when you use the free transform tool in Photopea in a way that you can't with the other transform tools. So I'm actually, every time I go to rotate a shape, I do edit free transform, change the rotation center like I'm doing now on the head, and then I rotate it. Now every single time I change where the person is standing, what position they're in, I'm going to start exporting those different figures. So what I accidentally did was I exported one of them before I resized the entire document. Once you're done creating your, so I exported this one. The first one is going to be too big. You want your entire document to be about 4 inches high with a DPI of 300. So right now it's 8.5 by 11 and the DPI is only 72. And I don't want that because it would be huge if I brought it into the Wick editor. So, let's see. I'm going to start exporting my thing now. File, export as PNG. Whoops, it was too big. Okay. Now, I'm going to change the DPI to 300. I'm going to change the height to 4 inches. I'm going to hit that chain and it will automatically resize the width. And now I'm going to do file, export as PNG. And then I'm going to rotate part of my figure, edit, free transform, and then change the rotation point, change the where the axle goes, and make it so it's actually on the joint of the like in this case it's going to be the elbow. So I'm going to do edit, free transform, and I'm going to change the rotation point to the elbow, and then I'm going to rotate it. And in this way, I'm going to keep exporting every time I change part of the body, every time I rotate part of the body or make part of the body move, I'm going to export a new PNG. So what I'm going to have is a series of movements, a series of complete puppets that can move. And because I am saving them in a row from each other, they're going to be automatically numbered. When I look in my downloads, I'm going to see, they're going to be automatically labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, because I'm not renaming the file, but it needs to be able to save different versions. It automatically will number them. So every time I'm saving a PNG, I'm moving it slightly, saving it again, moving it slightly, saving it again. I don't want to have to bring all these different layers, all these different body parts into the Wick editor. It's a lot easier to create a movement cycle out of a series of puppets in Photopea. It only will take me a few minutes, and I can reuse those movements in a cycle over and over and over again. So when I'm done creating my sequence of movements, and I would suggest if you're going to do a movement sequence, usually 8 or 9 movements will take care of it. And now I'm opening up the Wick editor. I'm going to make sure I resize my file to 1080. Always do that. And I'm going to now import my sequence of robots. I started from the second one all the way to the last one. I didn't bring that first one in because that was the one I forgot to resize before. So I'm now going to start bringing my robots into the Wick editor. You'll see they're just the right size for the Wick editor. If I turn the onion skinning on, I can match them all up exactly, and I'll have a little dance sequence. Then I can add in additional layers to make an interesting background so that my dancing robot has a story to tell. Now, in this way, by being able to build a figure out of shapes and straight lines, you really don't have to worry that much, A, about your drawing ability, and B, about the fact that you're just using a tracking pad and you don't really have a mouse or a drawing tablet. So I'm now going to start adding in a little bit of a background to my dancing figure and use the tools that I already understand how to use to create a story. So if you look up at the top right-hand corner of the, top right-hand above the stage, you're going to see next to the copy and the paste and the little garbage can, there's a down arrow. That down arrow has all sorts of features, like it can take a shape and move it from the back to the front. It can take a shape and move it from the front to the back. It can flip, horizontally flip a figure over, etc. So those are some new features I want you to explore.